Hello and welcome to episode 13 of Performer on Record, the official podcast of Performer Magazine. I'm your host, Ben, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Performer, and today we've got a very special episode. Some cool guests have joined us from the Maestro team. You may have seen some news buzzing around the internet around the reintroduction of the Maestro brand from Gibson, which is really cool. We've got our hands on a number of these pedals. They kind of evoke that classic 60s feel. So we're going to talk to Craig Hockenberry from Maestro and another special guest about the brand relaunch, about a little historical context of how pedals initially entered the marketplace back in the early 60s, some of the early tracks that you can go listen to that feature some early pedals, especially fuzz. And then kind of what led to the relaunch of the Maestro brand and the new pedal line. And we'll go through each individual pedal and kind of talk a little bit about, some of the cool things. There are a number of overdrives and fuzzes and distortions available at launch, and also some really cool modulation effects. I'm digging the chorus particularly. It's got that Bucket Brigade component inside, which is really cool. So anyway, without further ado, we'll dive into the interview. We'll talk to two of the guys from the Maestro team. We'll learn all about the ins and outs of the new pedal launch, and then I'll join you at the end to wrap things up. So take a listen and let us know if you have any questions. So we are here with Craig and Anthony, both working on the new Maestro relaunch over at Gibson, and we're happy to have both of them joining us today to kind of talk a little history and what's in store for today's artists. So thank you guys for joining us today.
Thanks, Ben. You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
So what would be really great is, because we have a lot of younger readers and listeners to the show, a lot of them may not be as familiar with the history of the brand and may not realize the significance of this relaunch. So it might be good to take it all the way back to say what was happening in the context of popular music in the early 60s, especially with guitar, and what the introduction of these pedals meant at that time to music.
Okay, I can start with that. So a little background on how this kind of was founded and how Maestro was founded. It really all began in a studio in Nashville. There was a musician at the time recording a track, and one of the channel strips on the console at the studio went out, and it created a tone with a guitar that Marty Robbins really loved. And so they wanted to try to recreate that. So a studio engineer by the name of Glenn Snoddy, who was working at the studio at the time, recreated that sound and introduced the first commercially available effects pedal as the Maestro FZ1 fuzz tone. And this was in 1962. So really, the Maestro fuzz tone is the granddaddy of them all, of all the effects pedals to follow. So,
and basically, we have sort of studio mishaps to thank for kind of, a sound that launched a million records.
Yeah, exactly. And it started this whole, giant movement of effects pedals. It's pretty amazing.
And the reason I bring that up to put things in historical context is because I think for a lot of younger players, say someone who's maybe 16 or 17 picking up a guitar for the first time, it's probably hard to imagine a world where all you really had was a guitar and an amp, and that was kind of it in terms of tone shaping. So we really want to hammer home kind of what a revolution it was to have a small independent unit that you could, switch on and change and alter, the sound of the guitar, which really, had a sort of limited palette almost at that time.
Yeah. Prior to that, it was, clean guitar through a clean amp, pretty much. That's about all you had. Unless you tore your speakers or something like that, which was known to be done as well. But, and then, later on, it took a few years for that sound to really catch on, but what really made it hip was in 1965 when Keith Richards used it on the record Satisfaction. That's what really blew it up.
And could you ask for maybe a more perfect way to demonstrate your new product, or create demand in the marketplace than that?
Exactly, and even that was a bit out of mistake. That intro part of that song was to be a horn part, and so he was just demoing that part through his guitar with the FZ1 just as a demo track.
Yeah.
But the band loved it so much, they cut it on the track, and that's, the rest is history on that.
And I mean, of course, from there, you get countless imitators trying to recreate that sound, and probably countless companies trying to recreate that unit and sell their own versions. But Maestro was there, at the beginning, at the forefront, and they really made their stamp on music history. And I don't think that's an overstatement, because without something like that, the sound of guitar, and in turn the sound of popular music throughout the 60s, which shaped the next few decades to come, is probably quite dramatically different.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I encourage everybody to go to maestroelectronics.com, where we have a historical timeline of some of those records that helped shape the history of music, and how Maestro was a part of that. And it's everything from Rolling Stones to the Who to the Doors. All these iconic bands and iconic songs used some of the iconic Maestro pedals in the 60s. So.
Absolutely. And that stuff, reverberated, into the 70s, into the well beyond, just the limited lifespan of, say, a radio single at that time.
Sure.
I think what I'd love to do is learn a little bit more about maybe the impetus behind kind of the relaunch of the brand, and what prompted Gibson. And it's no secret that Maestro is, a brand owned by Gibson. What prompted the relaunch, and why now? Why is now a good time to bring this back into the public consciousness and reintroduce a new generation to a whole new slew of what look like really cool pedals?
Right. So I can go back a few years here to new ownership when the new owners acquired Gibson. Prior to them, the Maestro brand was kind of dormant from 1975-ish until this year. Mm. And when the new owners came, we looked at all the brands that Gibson has under its umbrella, and Maestro really popped out there as, wow, we have a very iconic brand, much like Gibson, Epiphone, and some of the other brands we own, and it's just sitting here dormant. And the pedal market is booming,
right?
And there's no better time than the present to jump back in that market, and kind of reinvigorate our iconic past, and come into the market with a lineup of pedals that would kind of work nicely on anybody's pedal board. And that's what we did. And now, just from that short time where we decided to do it, to the launch now, to the launch that just happened, to now we have a roadmap of products that's going to keep Maestro in the front of everybody's mind for the next 5-6 years.
That's awesome.
So it's very exciting.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, the time is right. The rise of, at least from what we've seen from the magazine, the rise of these boutique pedals that people are clamoring over. They're spending, $3, $4, $5, $6. I mean, the prices are going through the roof, and a lot of them are trying to recreate, something that Maestro did. We're talking 60 years ago now.
Yes.
But I think one of the really great things that people should know about the new relaunch is these pedals are coming in at a really affordable price point. We're not asking boutique prices for the fuzz or for the chorus or anything. You're hovering at that $149 price, which is really in line with a lot of the competition out there. So it's not being priced out of the box. It's not something that's unattainable for people who really want to play these things.
Right, exactly, and that was kind of our mantra from the beginning, was to come out with these standard pedal sets, simple 3-knob single toggle switch designs, and go right to the meat of the market right out of the gate. And we thought that was important for the initial launch.
And what's cool is you're using that that retro aesthetic. I mean, these look like mid-century designs from a stomp box standpoint, which I think is really going to be cool for not only collectors but people who looks matter.
Yeah. We worked hard on kind of capturing that Oberheim pedal area, that time where he had the geometric shapes and the Maestro Bugle logo on some of his pedals, and we think we captured that pretty well.
It's very 60s. Are any of these designs actually from that era, or these are all brand new designs?
No, they're brand new designs. I mean, obviously we've evaluated many of the old Maestro circuits because we wanted to make sure we got some of the vintage Maestro vibe in these circuits, but they're all brand new circuits.
Yes, there's inspiration taken from the heritage for sure, but they're brand new.
Yeah. So that brings us to a really good point about the circuitry and the design of the actual electronics inside. I know from talking with pedal builders who do things contemporarily that getting parts that were available, say 50, 60 years ago is difficult, and they kind of have to work around that. Did you guys run into any sort of difficulties from the electronics design standpoint where things maybe just weren't available, or there were substitutes that weren't the same? Or maybe you could walk us through the process of rebuilding this sound with modern components.
Anthony, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a lot of, like, for instance, the chorus and the delay, we're using bucket brigades, which are currently available. As far as procurement goes, of course, that's another issue. Everything's getting more and more difficult to get. But that happened to be, a historical approach that is available. As far as things that are not available and we had issues with, there really wasn't any of that. The fuzz is a silicon-based fuzz, so we didn't have to deal with the struggle of getting germanium transistors. And that was the initial approach. That's not to say we won't head in that direction at another point in time, but we really we didn't have a whole lot of issues as far as components or anything that would hinder going after the vibe that we were going after, which was really leaning into an analog, classic, vibey, tons of character pedal line.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll add that a little bit, Anthony. We made sure we used components out of the gate that wasn't going to be a supply constraint, because we knew we were going into the meat of the market and the demand was going to be quite high. And the last thing we wanted to do was to have our customers not be able to buy the product. And so we made sure we designed that in from the beginning.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially now. You hear on the news all the time with chip shortages. Keeping kind of an all analog circuit design probably alleviates at least some of that concern, I would imagine.
Yes, it does. Yep.
So I would love to talk about the individual designs of the 5 that are going to be available at launch, if that's cool with you guys.
Yeah.
So I know we've got 3 that I would say fall under the distortion category. We've got that classic fuzz, we've got a drive, and we've got a distortion. And I think maybe for people who are kind of new to the world of pedals, maybe we could kind of describe what the differences are, because I think that confuses a lot of people. It all sounds distortion-y, but there are subtle differences and there are some not so subtle differences. And then I'd like to get into kind of the individual pedals themselves. So if we can talk about kind of what makes each one of those types of sounds unique, I think that would clarify things for a lot of folks.
Sure, I can take that. Well, when you're talking about dirt pedals, you're talking about a signal that's being clipped, right? So typically when you have an overdrive, you lean towards smoother clipping sound, less abrasive, abrasive could be a good word for that. When you get into distortion, it's a heavily saturated clipping. And when you have a fuzz, you want it to be a little wild and woolly. There's a lot more when it comes to the fuzz. There's a lot more high frequency content, so you're getting a lot of the harmonics added in there, and that's why fuzz is very. I mean, you can get as nasty and dirty as you want with a fuzz. Where an overdrive is a little bit more tame.
Yeah,
and there's different varieties of overdrives, transparent, and then with distortions, Maestro doing a distortion is a really interesting thought for a lot of people. And we really wanted to nail something that was meaty and just was reminiscent of classic distortion tones and sounded very analog and had a unique voice to it. So as far as the distortion goes, I think we achieved that. And with the overdrive, we wanted a versatile overdrive that could swing from kind of always on use to where it's barely breaking up to, as you notice, it gets real saturated.
Yeah.
But when it gets saturated, it isn't really quite that distortion saturation. It's still in the realm of an overdrive. And actually with that overdrive, if you plug it into 12 volts, which is an option, you get more headroom, and it kind of turns it into its own thing. It opens up. And in the fuzz is just, classic, heavily clipped signal. We focused on really, really getting across a nice blend of harmonics and have them available and have the ability to tame that back at will. And I don't know how far you want to get into each pedal at this point, but
no, I think that's a good overview. You use the word woolly, which I think is a really interesting descriptor for it. And like you said, if you go to the Maestro Electronics website, you'll see that there's a whole history timeline there. So you can actually go, if you want to listen to some of those tracks and hear real world examples of what that sounded like, in a mix. I think what's cool about the fuzz too that I want to talk about from a design standpoint, there's a mini toggle on there where you can flip between a modern and a classic tone. So what would the differences be there from a playing perspective?
Sure. Well, the classic tone, we were going for something that harkened back, not an exact copy, obviously, but harkened back to the original FC1A, which was a very high-pass focused, tons of high-frequency content.
Yeah.
But unlike the original, we wanted to allow you the ability with that tone control to kind of dial back the hair of it.
Mm.
So you can smooth it out or you can have it wide open. And then when you flick it to modern, you get a lot more body. The body that's lacking in the classic is introduced in the modern section. But then in addition to that, in the modern setting, the tone control, the tone stack changes, and it actually functions a little bit different to where you can completely cut out all the high-end wild and woolliness, and then you can also push completely into it and lose all the body. So in the end, in approaching this pedal, what we wanted to do was give just a full broad spectrum of tonal possibilities. You have 3 knobs and a toggle switch. We wanted to give you the options, the ability to just spend some time with it and see how it really acts differently with different guitars, different pickups, different. It's just pretty versatile in both of those settings. You have one that's classic, that's a little nasally, so to speak, that you can tame, and then one that has all the body, but also allows you to get even deeper with unique tones.
And I think what's cool too about these is, for all that versatility that you talked about, really we're looking at a super intuitive layout. I mean, a toggle switch and 3 simple to use controls is the perfect layout for someone like me who just wants to get in there, move some knobs around, dial in my sound, and not have to go menu diving, not have to worry about 45 different little switches that I don't know what they do. But still, even with that simple setup, like you talked about, you could go from classic to raunchy to smooth to all these variations in between. and it's not going to overwhelm you from a playing standpoint, especially like if you're in the studio trying to get a new sound. It's super simple just to dial it in, but you do have an amazing amount of range available,
Awesome.
especially in that fuzz.
Awesome. Yeah, that was the goal. Yep. Absolutely.
So that's the fuzz. That's the drive. That's the distortion, which is kind of new to the game. I think what is worth mentioning too is, correct me if I'm wrong, but these are all true bypass, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And for those who maybe don't understand or maybe don't appreciate the importance of that, maybe you could just touch upon real briefly why you would want a true bypass type of pedal in your chain.
Well, with true bypass at every junction, you're referencing your pickups. You're not introducing a buffer between any of the pedals. You're always referencing your guitar, and that seems to be where people are at and what people are really into these days, and that's what we're providing.
Cool. So we got to talk about the chorus. It's probably my favorite of the mix because just from a personal standpoint, I tend to play a little bit more cleanly. And when I do, I like to add just a little chorus just to get a little movement going so it's not so sterile sounding. Just a little something extra shimmering on the top end, to get that clean sound really to come to life. You had mentioned earlier that you're using a bucket brigade technology inside there. I've seen this a lot on a lot of modern synthesizer reissues, but maybe you can talk about why that's so special and kind of coveted, especially when it comes to chorus and delays and things like that.
Well, they have their own character. I mean, it's undeniable. For one, with the delay, you have natural degradation as the repeats carry on, where you can try to recreate that in digital, and a lot of pedals do, but with the bucket brigades, you have that. So I think as artists in general, setting aside just being musicians, there's a lot of what tends to be interesting and draw in people's attention are kind of imperfections rather than perfections.
Yeah.
There's always a place for perfection, obviously. But in using bucket brigade technology rather than going digital, you're able to capture, without having to do a whole lot of work, capture the real deal. And it's old technology, and it's still relevant, and it's still sought after for a good reason. I'm speaking to the chorus specifically, there are tons of choruses on the market, and there's a lot of pristine choruses that are, they're almost 80s like, and the lushness, and that's a thing that people love. So we didn't necessarily want to do that. Again, we wanted to kind of approach this with going, okay, here's say the chorus pedal. It's a chorus pedal, and it's a meat and potato sort of pedal. But how can we make this kind of interesting and have some character? So we went at it wanting to make sure it had warmth. We knew it has a swirly thing to it. I'm sure you're hip to.
Yeah, it's almost like a old Leslie speaker, without having to deal with an old Leslie speaker.
Right.
But you get that movement.
There. Yeah, and we wanted to, again, with this pedal, it sounds like you spent some time with it. You spend some time with it, it's kind of interesting, all the different areas you can get into. It can be subtle. It can just add some body, and then it can lean heavy into the swirly thing. And then we have the orbit mode, which is amplitude modulation, rotary speaker effect sort of vibe with a trim pot on the inside. And that orbit mode is actually, the LFO is synced with the chorus itself. So you could take that swirliness, and then in addition to the swirliness, you can add this vibe effect. And then you get into the mix control, and you have all the opportunity to blend as much of that into your chain as you want. And in the end, I think what we ended up with is a chorus with a lot of character and a lot of warmth, and something that, and actually, with all of these pedals, but the chorus, I really feel would be a cool tool in the studio. Like every studio should have this chorus, because it kind of does some unique stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it fits well in the track. And
And I think
I'm a fan of this chorus.
What's cool too is when you deal with analog circuitry like that, you can play the same chord over and over through something like this, and it's never going to sound the same twice. And that's kind of like you mentioned earlier, that sort of imperfection where every time you play through it, you're getting a little bit different character. You also touched upon something too, which, I had mentioned previously. I like the idea of a simple layout, a toggle and a couple knobs, but these pedals do also feature the ability to go tweaking. There is an internal trim pot. If you've got a little, tiny screwdriver, you can actually adjust a lot of the settings to kind of go whole hog if you want on some of these things, especially with the distortion thresholds and the chorus, which we had just talked about. So I think that kind of mix of simplicity, but also maybe appealing to the tweakers and the modders out there is kind of a really nice touch. Was that sort of a conscious thing you had decided to do, or was that just always part of the plan?
That was always part of the plan and conscious thing. Yeah, absolutely. We wanted to, we committed to 3 knobs and a toggle, and some of these pedals you want to tweak. So, and who doesn't love a little extra tweaking with a trim pot? Right? Yeah.
For the people who want to go nuts, go nuts. For the people like me sometimes who just, I want 3 simple knobs to move, I'm good to go. But the option is there, which is cool. So it even takes it that one step further. And like I said earlier, when you hit that price point, a lot of times you're not getting that. You're getting, what you see is what you get type of things. And if you want any adjustability, you got to go up higher in the chain. So I think that's a really, cool selling point, especially at launch.
Cool.
Now, the last one that we should probably hit upon is the delay pedal, which I know is also using the Bucket Brigade device, the BBD, inside. So this is more of a classic delay and less of, that sort of digital delay that, we hear all the time. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what makes this pedal unique, and that kind of rounds out the 5 at launch.
Sure. Well, we wanted to have it voiced in a way that was, it was analog. It wasn't going for the pristine delay. It was going for something, again, that had a lot of character and vibe. And I think it stands out. I think it delivers in that sense. Another thing that's cool about this is how the repeats are degrading.
Yeah.
Degrading. They break up. They break up in a particular way that I think is very tasty. And then the modulation effect, if you really get in there and tweak those trim pots, you can find some cool tones with that modulation. That's a little bit different than a lot of the other pedals on the market.
Cool. So I think that brings us up to speed on the fuzz, the overdrive, the distortion, the chorus, and the delay. I mean, that's quite a hefty launch lineup. I mean, most companies when they come to market, they've got one product. You guys have decided to put out 5, and it sounds like there's more stuff in the works. I don't know how much you can talk about kind of future plans, but can we expect maybe more types of pedals in the future bearing the Maestro name? I know there's talks of custom shop type of stuff. What's coming down the pipeline for the brand?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Yeah. Well, there's an unlimited number of possibilities that's coming down the line, but I will say there are going to be more pedals like this first launch coming, and they will be coming sooner than later. I can say there will be some reissues coming. I can't say exactly what models, but there will be some reissues, some of the classic Maestro pedals from the 60s. And then anybody can use their imagination in the pedal world of what could be coming in the next 5 years. I mean, we will definitely go back to the lineage of Maestro's innovation. Because in the 60s, Maestro was very innovative for that time. And we will get back to that innovation, but in a modern way. We will innovate on not only tones and sounds and effects, but the ways those tones and sounds and effects are achieved.
Cool.
Different circuits, different. There might be mechanics involved. There may be, fluids involved. Who knows?
So it sounds like this is the launch is almost an appetizer of things to come.
It is. It is. It's an appetizer. Yes.
Cool. Well, I'm excited for the launch. We've got our hands on the first batch of pedals here. So anybody who's listening, definitely check out the magazine and the YouTube channel for our thoughts on the pedals. I can give you kind of a spoiler alert. We liked all of them. I'm kind of partial to the chorus myself. And we're definitely looking forward to good things, to come in the future from the Maestro brand. It's exciting to bring something back that meant a lot to so many people for a new generation.
Yeah, it's exciting to be part of it for sure. It's amazing.
Cool. Well,
yeah.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk to us about the new launch, the new pedals, what people can expect, tone wise. And like I said, we'll stay tuned for more great things to come. And where can people get more information about the new lineup and Maestro in general?
They can go to the website. Our website is maestroelectronics.com, and you'll find everything you need to know there. That website.
All right, so everybody go check that out and stay tuned for more. Thanks again, guys, and hope we can talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for listening and tuning in this week and joining us as we talked with the Maestro team about the new relaunch. We're excited about this. I think the pedals are really cool. I love the little light that lights up. I know that's a minor thing, but for me, when you put those little details in, it's those little touches that it kind of makes something worth owning. They're priced right, $149 across the board. Can't go wrong. One of them might be like $10 more, but in that price range, I think is a smart move by the Gibson team, not to go nuts on the boutique-y type pricing. Some of these clones that I see nowadays are just absolutely insane. So these are fairly affordable, not cheap. But well made, good sounding. We've got the whole pedal board set up here that we'll be testing out for the magazine. All the drives and fuzzes and modulation effects on one board. So that'll be fun for us to check out. And we've also got an article going in the upcoming print issue, February, March 2022. If you're hearing this in the future, go do a Google search for it. You can find a digital issue. If the print is long gone by then, they usually go pretty quick. Anyway, got a special article coming up on the order in which pedals make sense on your pedal board, because that will dramatically affect the tone that you get. If you're throwing modulation effects in an effects loop on your amp, if you're putting them in front of the amp, in front of a distortion or behind a distortion, all that stuff can really make a difference in experimenting with how those things interact with each other is a really fun way to spend an afternoon. Anyway, thanks again to Maestro for sending us those pedals, for hooking us up with Craig and getting us that really cool first look and interview about the new relaunch. And like I said, check them out at your favorite retailer. Give them a try. We think they're super cool, and we'll catch you next time.